Okay, welcome to Cleveland Heights City Council Committee of the Whole meeting. It is Monday, July 6th at 6:03. Addie, please call this.
Cobb.
Here.
Larson.
Here.
Kosh.
Here.
DeWitt Boy.
Here.
Owen.
Here.
Fuda.
Here.
Stone.
Here.
All right, first thing we're gonna do is go through legislation. And let me get that. And I'll just start reading. The first ones are gonna be for consideration for adoption tonight. The first one is 135/2026, an ordinance to amend certain paragraphs of ordinance number 241-2025 and subsequent amending ordinances relating to appropriations and other expenditures of the city of Cleveland Heights for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2026. And I'll entertain any questions or comments people have.
Well, we can note that this one is related to the next one. And
Right.
this is related to the contracting of a
Yeah.
third party.
Waiting for that one to talk about it, right?
The first,
Yeah.
probably should have done the second.
Right,
Well,
so
maybe
the
this
money is one thing, it's $105,100. And then, of course, there's the legislation and the contract. So I've got questions, but
This is in relation to 136/2026, which is the
yeah,
companion.
and let me read that. That's a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a contract with International Code Council to assist in preparing the building and housing code updates.
So, Mr. President, maybe I
Please.
can just step over this
Yeah.
in consultation with Director Sam. This is a long time in coming, the companion study to the zoning code study to review our building codes, which have not been reviewed in decades. And I just want to endorse the staff's choice after a search of with the choice of a really truly outstanding consultant. And if you've reviewed the proposal, I think there's a great depth of knowledge that will be assisting us as we look at our codes and also look at our processes and how we can be more effective and efficient. I'm going to ask Director Zamp to talk about two things, and one is the funding of this proposal, and also an option is included in the contract, option A, that is related to technology. But I just want to endorse the choice here and hand it to you.
Please.
So thank you, Councilwoman Stone. And yes, this is something we've been talking about for a while. We spoke about it in committee, the whole issued the RFP. We're really happy that ICC responded. They are the gold standard, and a really impressive proposal. On the cost question, worked closely with the finance department. We have encumbered funds that we want to utilize to pay for this. So these are funds that are already there, quote unquote there. They just need to be decertified and then reapplied to this vendor. So it's sort of a cost neutral application. I had spoken to ICC to talk about their scope and their price, and you'll see in the letter that they attached, they dropped it down by $6,100 in Task 3, primarily because one of the advantages of ICC, they know codes throughout the country and the world, so their need to do research on existing codes, they felt like was less of a task for them. And so that's the cost answer. And then in terms of the optional task, if you remember when we spoke about this in committee, there was a real desire, I think, by everybody, but particularly council, to take a fresh look at the tools that we use to permit and engage with folks in the permitting process. They provided, both teams, but ICC did provide a really in-depth task. You'll see we did not recommend including that in this contract, and I spoke with Councilwoman earlier, there's a really one main reason for that, and that is the bipartisan legislation that's sitting on the president's desk, which is the 21st Century Road to Housing, has a number of provisions in there related to streamlining permitting And there's a strong likelihood that there will be funding for these types of things. So what we would recommend is not including that in the contract now. And as we see what happens over the next 4 days, if the president signs it or not, we should know by the time we come back from break. And if there's a desire at that time to either see if there's future funding or there is no funding, then we can amend the contract to include that. That would be all right.
That makes total sense to me. Is if we choose in the future to amend the contract, is that also funds that are cost neutral, or would that be another expense?
One of the advantages of using the encumbered funds from the previous years, so the budgeted 26 funds that we have some space there. So we could pay for it on our own, the fund, outside funding source that could help.
Okay, thank you.
So just a little bit of background, in the Novak report, when you look things over, there was a little slight flurry of activity in the 80s with our housing code. I mean, very little. And then maybe like 1 or 2 dashes here and there. I mean, it's almost nothing for 4 years. It's very little. There was some anecdotal stuff. They talk about recent code changes. I know at the end of this contract, and it's paging through here, it says that the budget hasn't been established yet. What exactly does that mean? Because you were just since we were talking about the scope of work and, leaving the optional task out, this is the disadvantage to having 300
There was a
pages.
budget attached at the very end.
There
It was
was.
quite at the very end, page
Well,
page
I
65.
mean, here's what it says. It says, this is off here. Under project budget, I'm on page 9 of 14 or 39 of 161. If you're looking at the whole thing, it says the city has not established a budget range for this project, but proposals will be evaluated on a competitive basis with cost considered alongside qualifications and approach. So
I think that's in the RFP
That's the RFP.
that we had sent
Yeah.
out.
If you
It
go
was
to
sent out.
page 65 of 166, at the very end of the actual proposal, they propose a budget that's pretty clear.
okay, that was confusing.
So that was the RFP that we said we didn't establish a budget, but then the consultants came forward with their proposals.
Yes, okay. Page 65. Yeah, that's what I figured. I figured it was just a matter of, we knew it was $105,000, but this is the breakdown. Okay. I do have other questions, but I'll leave it to council first. Go ahead.
Director Zampt, in the proposal, ICC states it will conduct the examination of best practices for no less than 3 neighboring jurisdictions. I'm hoping that Cleveland Residents First program will be one of those programs that they look at.
Yeah, it's up to us to identify what those neighboring jurisdictions, but that obviously is gonna be one of them. Probably we'll pick, one of our neighbors, whether it's South Euclid or Shaker Heights. But that's, I think, part of what we wanna talk about, obviously,
So,
with council is which are the 3.
yeah, so when you say obviously, I feel better. Thank you.
Anybody else? So one of the things under responsibilities is to lead stakeholder and community engagement. Do we know what that'll look like typically?
And this was part of the conversation I had with them prior to their amendment, is they firmly believe they think that engagement is really important when it comes to these matters. And so they are going to be the ones who are leading those sessions. So there'll be a virtual session going on, and then a later session that is in person, both with council and then with the public. And so while the staff will be there supporting and the council is appropriate. That those engagement sessions will be led by the technical experts that were hired. And so when the question comes in from the community member about, you know, what's the best practice or how should this go change, they're gonna be the ones who are there to be able to answer.
All right, so in the Substack, under background review, data collection and analysis, it says that the consultant shall review the city's current building and housing codes and provide a kind of an assessment. Can we see that before, you know, when they've completed that particular task? I think that would be good for us to see before they, you know, as opposed to, you know, at the end.
Yeah, we have
Just-
that as a deliverable, it's a memorandum or whatever format they're gonna provide to us of their review of that part. So we can certainly share that with you as a work product.
And so they're still gonna review the inspection and permitting processes, right?
Yeah.
But just not
Not the digital tool component.
the digital tool, okay. Let me see.
I have a question about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
As they go through the review process and you get the final deliverable reports, and it appears that maybe our digital tools can't accommodate what they're suggesting that we should be doing, will you consider option A at that point?
Yeah, I think we're gonna consider it before that point.
Oh, okay.
It's on the table, we just wanna figure out the best way to include it.
All right, because I know you don't want to be limited by the technology either, so, thank you.
I think the strength of option A is not only the digital piece, but all the process review,
Sure.
streamlining, staff engagement. I think there's a lot there.
Yeah.
So I hope that we'll be able to do it.
So again, under stakeholder and public engagement, 4.2, could the tag possibly be that group, that former CIC group?
I would think we would want a different set of people in the room.
So explain who or what, you know, who would want in that room.
We want folks who are involved, have a technical expertise or particular interest in sort of building and housing, the enforcement and the permitting.
So you mean like staff?
Not just staff, but you know, that may include some of the members who are represented on now the development committee. You know, the sort of the real estate world would be important as part of that. Contractors would be important. People who are dealing with this on an everyday basis. And, you know, we would want probably landlords and property owners represented in that as well. But yeah, I think they're two different groups.
Skill set, okay, very good. Task 5, preparation and adoption of building and housing code amendments. Let me see.
Mr. President,
Yes,
before we move on, I would just make a plug for lay members of the tag as well who have gone through, you know, permitting in the city or have been cited for violations and gone through that process as well as the technical experts.
Good idea.
I didn't think of this at the time when I was reviewing the packet, but is it possible to have also a web form or somewhere, like we did public comments for zoning changes a couple of years ago where we just put it up on the website, we left it open for 30 days. I mean, we've heard so much from residents about complaints about housing enforcement, and I think obviously planning staff has heard, but maybe if there's just during this process a place for residents to send in their, you know, my neighbors, I put in this complaint, and I know we'll hear a lot of, let's say, things that were taken care of, but maybe not in the most timely fashion, but I still think it's worthwhile to allow the public, if they can't attend a meeting, to have some other way, whether it's a mailbox, a web form, something where we can get that feedback to the consultants during the process.
I think there was an online survey. as part
Well,
of
the
this.
s- well, the
The survey
survey-
would be different.
To me, it's a little bit different because, you know, we don't want all of this, we don't want people sending tons of emails to Todd at the Mayor's Action Center about this, because that's not the point. But I feel like instead of a survey, also people are not necessarily willing to go through a whole search.
Could we potentially pull previous issues, like either from the MAC or from, you know, other emails with issues, to give the consultants a sense of the type of issues that
I
come up?
think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I was presuming that this planning staff would do that anyway, cause they're gonna
Sure.
be talking with the consultants, but just to have people feel like if they can't come to a meeting, there's still a way to engage in the process in some form or fashion.
Yeah, I think that's part of the conversation we'll have with them, should they be put under contract.
I mean, Todd already has that stuff disaggregated from, you know, everything else. So under task 5, preparation and adoption of building and housing code amendments, how does the collaboration work with our law department and, you know, Dexter and, I mean, the people that are kind of in the trenches?
Yeah, we're gonna have an internal working team, obviously, with key folks, and law will be an important part of that. So once it gets to this point, past 5, that's when law really starts to get involved. They're gonna be looking at every change.
All right, I'm at the, yeah. Okay. I've gotten to the end of mine. Anybody else? All right. Sorry, just looking through this. All right, 137, a resolution authorizing the mayor to accept and expend grant funds under the Cuyahoga County Board of Health for the Lead Safe program for 2026 to 2030. Questions? Yeah, please.
The question for me is whereas clause number 3 states the program will quote provide services to residential units occupied by low to moderate income households, providing units with prioritizing units with young children. Makes sense to me. Then it goes on to say the grant requires the units that receive these services be occupied by a child under the age of 6 years, or shall be units where a child under the age of 6 spends a significant amount of time visiting. Is there a criterion for the amount of time the child needs to be visiting in the unit? Whoever wants to answer that. Like, does it have to be so many hours a week, or?
Yeah, so I can answer. It is a certain amount of hours per week for the standards that we have. I don't know offhand what it is, but I think it's 20 hours per week or something like that. Could be a grandchild.
20 hours
per month.
Per month, and so that's not a very heavy lift, is it?
So like a grandparent that takes care
Right,
of part-time, not even without custody.
yeah. Could you send me that, wherever that's included, so I could have that for reference, please?
Yeah, we'll put together, because this program hasn't rolled out yet, we'll put
Okay.
together a fact sheet for
All right.
everyone to use.
I appreciate that, thank you.
All right, anything else?
Oh, one
Yeah.
thing, for Director Brodzinski, where are the funds for the $270,000 local match coming from? Which fund will those come out of?
I can answer that. So that's not local match, that's property owner match, so I mean, it's not required that the city match it, we can, but that's not how it's set up.
Okay,
It's for anything that goes over the cap is what we charge. We
Right.
usually double that match,
so it's,
especially if we're doing, since the subsidy is less for investor owned properties, usually those ones make up a huge portion of.
so local in this case means the property owner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
local means non-federal, basically,
All right.
but that's where we get it from.
Right, you're off the hook.
Yeah.
Mr. President?
Yes.
So you had said that the program is not yet rolled out, but presumably we're gonna do, you know, email all communication channels, and then we'll have like something on the website with eligibility. And then I've actually already heard from at least one resident who I guess had reached out to the county about this, and the county said, oh yeah, it's happening. And then, you know, then we said, well, not quite Yes.
For them it is, not for us.
Right, so I guess to the extent, like how long will it take once the legislation?
So if I could add, I mean, we've had this grant going since like 2002. And so we've been doing it for 25 years now on different grant cycles, whether it's 2 years or 4 years. So what we want to do is take a look at the current policy and procedures and make sure that it fits with what we're doing now. So the times haven't changed. We want to expand some of the limits or requirements of it within HUD regulations, right? So we should be able to have some modifications of that and then roll it out, for the public.
Yeah, I would think by the end of this month we'll have applications.
Thank you.
Alright, 138, a resolution declaring property at 3378 Blanche Avenue to be a nuisance.
I just want to thank Director Butler and the Housing Department for moving this forward. I mean, this has been a property that I personally have been aware of for many years and asked about when I was a resident because it was so bothersome to me, the condition of the property. So I really hope that the property owner will take this and pay for the necessary the citations and the necessary actions that are needed to be taken to bring it back up into code. Really quite happy that we're moving this forward.
Is that the next step after, I'm looking at section 1, I kind of read it, but is that what happens after this?
So once it's approved by council, and any nuisance order, right, has its own procedure to it. So this one, I'm gonna ask council to approve it. If nuisance order will be mailed and posted on the property, they'll have so many days, typically it's 14 days to appeal or abate the nuisance
Okay.
themselves or pay a cost. If that doesn't happen, then the city can move forward and abate that nuisance according to the order. And then if they don't pay, we have to bill them for the cost of the nuisance. If they don't pay it, then we can apply it to a tax lien, which is, we just certify those once a year and it goes on to their taxes. So that's the process, barring an appeal. Nobody answers it. If it's an appeal, we set up a nuisance abatement appeal board review hearing and move forward with that appeal.
Vice President Larson?
This is a question, not a question, a request to Director Zamp and to Assistant Director Butler. Please include this property in the code review, because reading the history of it, it's an excellent example of code enforcement. Some of the things that perhaps need to be upgraded and updated to code enforcement to move these properties that are nuisance properties along much faster. Because it's been years and we hear that time and time again. I've seen it time and time again. So that's just a request. And I am putting a list together of sample properties, so for reference.
Just to follow up, I think this is a tool that we underutilize in the city. I mean, there's only been a handful of nuisance abatements requests to this council that I can recall. And I would like to see us be more diligent. We let this go on far too long.
So I would tend to disagree with you a little bit. I don't bring every nuisance abatement to council, and not everyone has to be. But for certain situations where there's demolition involved or removing the structure, that has to go to council. Revocation of occupancy permits has to go to council. Everything else can be done administratively through the designee and with the mayor's approval. So this one I felt needed to be approved by council. It is a problem property that I've tried other options on getting compliance on, and it hasn't quite worked. So I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware and approved it before I move forward with it.
So, Councilwoman Stone, maybe from time to time, when you're, your section of the committee of the whole, you could get that information about, nuisance abatements that we might not have heard
Sure.
about.
Be happy to do
Yeah.
that.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna make a comment. I think what's nice about this is what seems like we've almost all spoken about, hey, yay, this is really great stuff. And we'd like to see more of it. And if there's more of it, it would really be helpful to see that somehow.
I mean, I can provide information for you guys on nuisance and some of it gets into weeds. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Councilman. Right, it goes down to the minute of grass cutting versus, you know, we paint a house, right, put a roof on it because we know that it's the best thing for that property.
You know, I'll leave it to staff to determine if it's too much or not enough, okay? I mean, it's really, this is an administrative function. I think we all respect that. But we do get weekly, if not more than weekly, messages about either a particular property or a particular area of town. And it's like, well, you know, that's really not we're a legislative body, you know, we're not doing these nuisance abatement things, but it'd be really nice to be able to see, we see this activity happening. I mean, maybe it's just a presentation to council in the next couple of months when it's convenient. Just so we can get an idea what's going on.
Yeah, perfectly understandable, and I'll put something together.
Great.
I couldn't agree more. What I was going to ask for is maybe quarterly as a list of addresses that and where they are in the process, because I do think that we get plenty of emails with addresses that says what's happening with this house. And a couple of them, this is our third nuisance piece of legislation since this, you know, for this council. So for those ones, I could say, yes, in April we did this, or in January we did this. But if we had a list we could reference quarterly, again, I understand this is a staff, operational request, so with the mayor's permission, but I think that would help us be able to not have to ask the housing department all the time to let us know what's going on with each address. You know, it would allow us to respond to emails and constituents more quickly, and for us to have a sense of the scope of the work that's happening as well.
Several weeks ago, I had a ride along with Assistant Director Butler, and we spent most of the morning going through problem properties throughout Cleveland Heights. And one other thing that occurs to me is we visited a number of properties that are owned by the city that are in disrepair or in some kind of limbo. And I think that may fall under maybe something that council can be more active in helping you resolve, because there are some places where it's just kind of pending. So that might be another piece of this work.
All right, very good. 139, a resolution confirming the appointment of Eric Zanth and Craig Cobb to 3-year terms. To the Cleveland Heights Tax Incentive Review Council. So we have another acronym. Here we go. All right, not very controversial. Let's see, 140. Resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with GPD for professional engineering services with MLK Drive, Donebrook Culvert pre-design study. Vice President Larson.
Director Klingscale. Hi. Hi. I look tired, I'm sorry. Been a long day. On task 2 of that GPD proposal, it states that the design team will consult with local environmental consultant to understand the impacts and design limitations of the historic stone arch culvert. Has a local environmental consultant been identified, or who picks that person or a company?
They have not been identified, but GPD will pick that company.
Okay. And then it also talks about coordinating with the other entities involved with this project. Will you be including the Donebrook Watershed Partnership as well as NEORSD and the Cleveland Heights in that coordination?
Well, with the pre-design study, we'll be working with the city of Cleveland, and we probably will at some point include the Donebrook Watershed Partnership, because at some point we're gonna have to determine what the fix is gonna be.
Sure.
So at that point, other partners will be brought in.
Okay, thank you.
And just to follow on that question, and will Cleveland Heights be making that determination? So you've communicated to me that we are the leaseholder now of that property, right, from the city of Cleveland. So are we in that decision, or is it the property owner of the city of Cleveland that would decide the remedy?
I would think that that might be in partnership with the city of Cleveland.
Go ahead, Councilwoman.
This actually, I think this might be a question for Director Hannah, but this is now yet another property that doesn't reside in our city, that we have somehow gotten into a lease agreement decades ago and are now responsible for what looks like it could be significant repairs. So I think I wanna thank Director Cleanscale for getting back to me on all the questions that I sent around why are we responsible for this, but I think the lease was from the 1990s.
1991.
Okay, so the lease is almost as old as
I think
me.
it actually, I think it's even older, to be honest.
Okay,
That
so
was
it's
the
rolled
most
over,
recent
okay.
iteration, right?
So I guess the question is, to what extent is there any remedy or recourse that we have if this is a pre-study, but if this is a multi-million-dollar fix, who knows, right, at this point? I mean, what we are on the hook for that. So I guess I'm asking the law department if they could look into this to see, like, are we fully responsible? Can we, maybe the mayor's office, like, re-engage with the city of Cleveland? I mean, we are a much smaller municipality than Cleveland, having to be on the hook for potentially a multi-million-dollar expense for a property that doesn't reside within our municipal borders.
Right, I think the 10,000 foot observation is that it's, part of the city's park structures. And that was sort of the basis of the lease, many decades ago. But I think looking at how those responsibilities are best carried out now and how they can be made more affordable and what kind of partnerships are available in cooperation makes perfect sense. So
Yeah, I mean, and I'll add to that, like, there's philanthropy that's available to Cleveland, but not Cleveland Heights, that has an environmental focus, all those, to your point. And the other thing is, like you said, decades ago, when all these parks were brand new and everything was new, well then, okay, fine, lovely, we will here, right, but now we're getting to the point where we're dealing with 100-year-old infrastructure that needs massive renovations. So to the extent we're able to either renegotiate those leases or enter into good faith discussions, I think that's really important for our long-term financial sustainability.
Councilman Posh.
So the elephant in the brook is we've got a dam that it's all interconnected. And that's depending on what source you hear, it's either 15, 50 or 100 million in fixes. I mean I think that's what we took over, and there really hasn't been a maintenance plan on any of these things.
I mean, even when I read through the whereas clauses, I'm just, like, the city of Cleveland Heights desires to undertake the pre-design study. I was like, really? That's desirable? And then the funding for this project, Director Clinkscale, has been appropriated and is available in the sewer fund, but not specifically for this, right?
Yes, because last year, as part of my budget request, I requested engineering and construction for this project.
I mean, I think the director's point is that we knew this was coming because technically we leased,
Yeah.
we are the stewards of this property, but that doesn't make it any more wonderful that we're gonna end up with the bill.
Right. And
Desirable, thank
what
you.
we don't wanna do is not act at all,
Yes.
considering there's a liability aspect to if something happens with it. So,
Keeping that in mind, is there a timeline for the pre-design to be done so we can continue to move forward?
I don't expect that it'll be done before winter. I don't think nothing's gonna it's gonna happen before.
And will weather hold it up then?
Well, so we'll get done with the pre-design, then we're going to design. By the time design is done, we're probably looking at next year in the spring or summer,
Before going out to bid or.
before going out to bid or anything. And this is a historical structure too.
Right,
Yeah.
so there's that one.
Quick question, that portion of Martin Luther King Boulevard, that's in Cleveland Heights, is that correct? That short stretch over this culvert?
I don't think, no, I think that's City of Cleveland.
Well, let's see. No, it is. I'm looking at the map. North Park is over
Right, North
And
Park is
there's a little-
Cleveland Heights.
There's a
and-
little piece, the interchange of North Park and
So,
Martin Luther King is in Cleveland.
so
Heights.
Cleveland Heights, that,
Oh,
No,
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 City
I-
of Cleveland,
It's
sorry.
Cleveland,
Pardon me.
it's Cleveland Heights' responsibility pursuant to the lease.
So when I was on school board, we were one of the parties, or we had a okay part of that lease of somehow, and it goes all the way up to the Roxborough putting fields. And farther, so I mean, I think we'd have to look at a plat map to really tell for sure.
And the survey will be done as part of this pre-design study, so
That's
we'll
good.
we'll have
It'll
the,
pin down all the
it'll
boundaries.
pin down all of that.
So again, equating this to the work that has to be done in the dam, and I think there's many members in the community that don't really appreciate the life safety aspect of this necessary work and why, we're sort of we have a gun to our head. I mean, we have to do this because it's a life safety issue. And I think we have these same issues with the dams too. I mean, we've seen some horrific pictures of similar earthen dams that have failed. And, I'm not proposing to knock the dams down. I think we need to work together with the sewer district and our partner cities and the community to figure out solutions. But I think there's some people that would just say, hey, just leave it alone. It's been okay for 100 years. I mean, we can't leave this stuff alone. I mean, we have to be working on solutions, which we are. So I guess I just wanted to make that statement.
Okay. We're gonna have to pick up the pace a little bit. 141, a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute agreements with Cummins Inc. and Gatto Electrical Services for the replacement of a generator, fire station number 2. Chief Harry is here. And how old is this generator?
The generator was built in 1980 and installed in 1981, I believe, when that station opened.
We got our money's worth.
Yeah, it's been a really great unit. But they just don't make parts for it anymore and it's limping along.
So we can have like a
Duct tape doesn't work any longer.
No, Steve's bubble gum just isn't holding it together.
Yeah,
we can have like a ceremony of some kind.
retirement?
So any questions about this? Yeah, go ahead.
I assume this was already budgeted from last year.
Yeah, there is an increase in the request for the better unit, and I'll have Lieutenant Bunker's speak to that a little bit, but I can move a couple things around. We're gonna hold off on the water manifold replacement and we'll make it happen.
Okay.
You wanna-
Basically, we based it off of the current generator doesn't run the whole station when the power goes out, it only runs parts of the station. And so this new generator was based off of the peak kilowatt demand that the station reaches over an 18-month period, which is a recommendation of the generator companies. And so it's going to accommodate the entire station at its highest demand.
And for the future.
And for the future, so it's got some wiggle room for potential expansion or addition of electronic demand for the station.
It looks like it's another $5,000 and you get a much larger unit, and that certainly makes a lot of sense.
For something this infrequent of a purchase, it makes sense to go with the bigger one.
Is Fire Station 1's generator as old or?
So it was, and then we had that one replaced probably about 10 years ago. If that-
It's been there my entire career, I've been on for 12 years, so
Okay,
it's
so
at least
it
12
probably
years
came,
old,
yeah,
but
right around just before you came back. They did replace that with a brand new unit and it works wonderfully.
Great. 140, Addie, what was the new piece of legislation? Does it have a-
143.
Oh, it's 143, okay. An ordinance adopting a new section 139.26 of the codified ordinance titled Additional Nominal Fringe Benefits and Public Purpose Expenditures. Somebody like to explain this?
So this is, I can address that, Mr. President. This is a piece of legislation that actually is related to a section of Chapter 111, which provides for the expenditure of city funds for meals for council when it goes through a meal time. And that's a provision that was relied upon in years past. Council in recent years has not purchased meals for most of its at least regular meetings, other than some of the weekend meetings. The other meetings, though, which are less frequent, could involve administrative staff meetings or employee appreciation events. And the Ohio Attorney General has opined that the best practice is for the legislative authority, the council, to determine whether it wants to acknowledge those types of expenditures as proper public purposes. And if the council makes that determination, then those findings are helpful with regard to any auditor's review and so forth. It's a common practice. It's just something that hasn't been codified previously in Cleveland Heights.
What brought this to your attention right now, like for this evening?
There is an upcoming new employee welcome event that was contemplated, and it just sort of teed up that question.
Thank you. I'll just say, I didn't realize we needed to authorize this, but it makes good sense when we're trying to build an employee culture in the city where people feel appreciated. I mean, every job that I have had has had being able to give gifts for new babies and marriages and retirements and have a luncheon to celebrate somebody or something. So I think that if we hadn't been doing this, then that would be more of a red flag than approving this as an appropriate public purpose to make sure our employees feel appreciated.
And this is even a little bit narrower than some of those situations that you mentioned, because they're public funds, and that of course is the reason that you want to have some additional written authorization for it. And it all then flows back to the mayor to make the determination or to approve the events, other than the ones that belong to council.
And to your point, Councilwoman Cohen, Director Shantz put together and I think Josie Moore, I forget who worked on it, but put together a wonderful holiday event, for the staff, and it was really nice, and a lot of goodwill I think came out of that. All right, 142, this is a first reading only, an ordinance amending various sections of Part 11 zoning code. This is about ADUs, accessory dwelling units. So, I definitely think we could talk about this. Obviously, it is just first reading. Councilwoman Cohen, since this was in your committee, you wanna?
Sure. I mean, I think just as a reminder, we discussed this at the recent committee of the whole meeting where we discussed the process in depth, and we agreed that while there are still policy decisions that need to be made, it would be to our benefit and for efficiency's sake to refer this today to the Planning Commission, where they can review it as recommended, the June ordinance red line by staff, provide their recommendations to us, and we would put this on the agenda following the recess for a fuller discussion, and I think we're scheduled.
I apologize, I was reading part of what you were
Okay.
saying. We can send this, you think it would be a good idea to send it to Planning Commission now
Correct.
and then do a second reading in August?
Yes, and we can do, frankly, we can do as many readings as we want following, but I think the discussion we had previously was that it would be a benefit to us to have the Planning Commission's input at this early stage as opposed to making a lot of changes, sending it to Planning Commission and then having them come back with different recommendations.
And just from a timing perspective, the referral to the Planning Commission should be at least 30 days, not more than 60 days, unless council later determines to provide them with some additional time.
So if we referred it today, when would be the next time they would meet to and be able to take this on?
So referring it today will allow their July meeting, which is the
Last one.
last Wednesday of the month. It will allow them to have a public meeting on this, public hearing, which will be an opportunity for the public to come to a meeting and express their comments, give their recommendation, bring it back to you. There's a required public hearing that council has to hold, so there's multiple opportunities.
Yeah, so probably won't be voting on August 17th.
No, just to discuss the Planning Commission's
Okay.
feedback. No.
So on the
I think
timing,
that-
we're just getting the ball rolling. I get it.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
And can I just have a procedural question, because
please.
I've only been on the other side of this, but do we vote in the council meeting to refer it, or is that just a decision we're making here to refer it to the Planning Commission?
I would probably have a motion to refer it
In
in the council meeting itself. Yeah.
So when I read it,
Yeah.
Mr. President, I just have a comment. One of the frequently mentions concerns by residents has been that these new ADUs would be used for short-term rentals. And I just want to comment that working with Director Sampson and Director Hannah, the short-term rental legislation is moving along. It has been revised and we hope that next week we'll have a discussion about it. And it includes a prohibition of using ADUs for short-term rentals. So that's where that's gonna live. It's not in this legislation, but it is in the short-term rental legislation. So that's just something to note.
Just a quick question about one of the whereas clauses. It says, oh boy, what is this? I don't know, it's about 7 or 8 down. Whereas on July 6th, City Council introduced this amending ordinance. I mean, did we do that?
We're doing that right
This.
now,
That's this.
right now.
It's the
It's
for
Okay,
council
because
itself.
I'm just looking.
So
It's in the doc.
that
Yeah, that just
recital
threw
and
me
the
off.
next 3 or so are structured to allow council and the council clerk to fill in the blanks as the process unfolds and it goes to the planning commission, comes back from the planning commission, goes to public hearing by council and then completes the
This
process.
is what I used to refer to as the ping-ponging of the
Yes.
zoning
Yeah.
ordinances as we
I just saw
pass it
Mayor
around. Yes.
Petrus's name on it and I was like, wait a minute. Okay,
Well, it's because it's coming
Mr.
from
President,
the
just,
administration.
yeah,
one comment. You'll see in the agenda memo, there's a link to a webpage that we have dedicated to ADU. That is constantly being updated. There now is an FAQ on that website, on that webpage for anybody to read. And we'll update it with whatever changes that happen. And just a reminder to the public, please send your comments. We already have received some comments, which we're working on with the law department. So the more that we get them, whether it's through council or directly to us, the more we can mold this so that it meets everybody's needs.
Planning at clevelandheights.gov.
so I'm just paging through here and I have an awful lot of questions and I'm gonna reserve them for another time. Just because perhaps planning commission will, take care of some of that and we just don't really have time. Second readings, 131, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a professional services agreement with TS Architecture LLC and design services for the Cumberland Pool Facility Modernization and Rehabilitation Project. So this is, let me make sure I'm on the right one. This is the 915,000 for the architectural services.
There's been an adjustment made in 132.
Got it.
This is gonna get us moving towards a new pool in 2028, so.
So I think we make that clear, right? We're once this ball is rolling. Go ahead, Mayor.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, we received 12 proposals. Each organization that submitted one had to put together a team, including civil, mechanical, structural engineers, designers, etc. And DS Architecture put together a very impressive team. The proposals ranged from about $700,000 to about $2.3 million. And so they initially, DS Architecture initially proposed almost $1 million. It was just shy of $1 million, and they were willing to reduce that by about 10% to $913,000. So we feel that we would be getting very good value from them, given all of the different firms that they are engaging for this effort. And we also expect that this will entirely fit within the $110 million budget that was passed by City Council at the end of the year.
I just wanna thank you for sending the proposal because reading through the different groups that are part of this, I mean, it's really incredibly impressive and I couldn't be more excited to get this rolling, so thank you.
And also to get all this done in the first 6 months, which is with all the other stuff going on, very impressive. Thank you, Mayor and staff. 133, resolution appointing an assessment equalization board to hear objections relative to the estimated assessments for a portion of the expense of street lighting within the city of Cleveland Heights.
President Kudo.
Yes.
I need to abstain on this. One of these individuals we're appointing is a very close friend of ours.
Oh, okay.
And I had nothing to do with picking this person or suggesting anything.
I think I'm set up with this great gig of
That's right. Eating from the public trough, right?
That begs the question, it was selected by the administration, right? So we should just say, like, these individuals were selected.
by the finance director.
Yeah, okay.
Does the finance director wanna explain how this is usually
I
done?
picked 3 pretty local finance directors. I'm part of a group with them. I reached out to the 3 of them and convinced them to do it.
Residents cannot be appointed to this, right?
Because every single resident's been assessed.
Mhm.
Normally, if it was a sewer project, then you pick residents from a different part of town that are not part of the project. Here, everybody's part of the project.
For that reason, we have to choose people who are not residents, and it's typical that we choose finance directors from other cities.
Because they've generally gone through a similar process in one
Yeah.
form or fashion in their communities. So they understand the concept.
And they're all county residents in accordance with the ORC.
Correct.
So all the boxes are checked.
All right, in 134 is a resolution appointing an assessment equalization board to hear objections relative to the estimated assessments. All right, fine. Well, there's parkway, grading, draining, curbing, paving.
There's a lot of it.
Okay, yeah. All right, so that concludes our agenda, which is new with the somewhat lengthy, you know, given that this is our last regular meeting until August 17th. So we're gonna go on to council rules. Vice President Larson, do you wanna?
If you need a printed copy or want one, otherwise you got one in the email this week as well. For your consideration. We have 15 minutes tonight, so 7:10 will be my goal.
Okay.
And I'd like to go through each paragraph and ask if any of you have a comment. If you do not, we don't finish tonight, we can, you know. But I'd like to look at the just to read the introduction so that people in the public can hear what we're trying to do. As a member of the Cleveland Heights City Council, we are considered representatives of our constituents. The city of Cleveland Heights residents support and expect that their elected officials are committed to the highest ideals, quality service, and proper conduct. The following rules and codes of conduct are submitted to provide council members with standards that will help us strive to do the city's work while functioning professionally to help the city thrive. The first paragraph is respect and civility. All members of the Cleveland Heights City Council are expected to conduct themselves with utmost respect and courtesy and politeness towards fellow council members, staff, members of the public. These standards should be followed whether in meetings, on emails, in public, and on social media. Members should refrain from engaging in any situation where their own values and beliefs are challenged. Does anybody have any comment on that particular section?
What did you mean by the last sentence, or what is meant by the last sentence?
I will say use social media specifically, where a council member may get into a back and forth with somebody challenging my beliefs or values, making assumptions about my beliefs and values, because we had that happen last year. So it's just trying to make sure that people understand that sometimes engagement is going to be difficult and perhaps pointless. As public officials, perhaps we need to step back and just let that particular situation evolve. Did you reword it or would you take it out?
I think I would reword it if that.
Okay, what would you suggest?
I just wasn't sure what you meant when I read it the first couple times. I should be thoughtful and engaging in any
There you go.
situation. Cause I think that's what you're looking for.
It's hard to know when that challenge will occur.
Well, and also what this challenge is. I have a lot of beliefs that other people may think are bad ideas, but I don't. And you know, it depends on if you're in the minority or the majority.
But the understanding that think about it each time that you get yourself into that situation.
For sure.
Is what we're saying.
You know, I see why you don't wanna do a long run-on sentence. I suppose that's redundant, but you know, I think that the sentence kind of disconnects, you know, you got the social media. I understand this sentence follows it, but I don't know if you reiterate that you should refrain from engaging when on social media, you know, maybe you just repeat it, just to make sure that it's clear that that's what you're referring to.
What if I took that second sentence and put it at the end?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Switch them out.
I mean, I think that's what happened. You read that and you're like, what's that connected to, right?
I didn't, but thank you
Yeah.
for giving me some grace. No, that would make it work.
Okay.
Is everybody okay with that? All right, adhere to council procedures. Council members must adhere to established meeting procedures and guidelines. Disruption of council procedures or failure to follow established protocols may result in penalties administered by the council president. And then President Kuda, that yellow highlight means that he wants us to add in there maybe the entire council Robert's rules. You must somehow to amend that sentence.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what I meant by that when
So are you okay with the council president administering the penalty? Should it get to that?
you have to ask them.
Say later
That's-
on in the
Council's gotta be okay with it.
penalties, that's the written warning, this is at the end, written warning issued by the council president or designated authority. So there may be an option for the president to refer it to.
Is he designating a council enforcer?
Or council itself.
Vice President Larson.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, okay, I think this conversation we're having is much needed. I mean, I do think we had a rocky road in the past with some uncivil behavior. Maybe I should just leave it at that. And I think with personal attacks to individual attacks targeted to throw us off base so we would be walking down another path. And it's not necessarily at us, but I like how you have later on, it was targeted to some people in attendance to our meetings as well. I am uncomfortable, referring to these as council rules. I like the idea of a softer term such as guidelines. I like the idea of a code of conduct. And I think if there's like an infringement, the option to do censure, which I see is here on page 3, well, I'm sure we're going to go down that path. But censure really requires a majority vote amongst peers to kind of confirm everything. So I just would like to throw that out there, not necessarily for discussion. This is your document. I trust you're going to do. I'm not sure if we would even vote on this. Would we want to legislate this? Is this where this is going?
Did you see this as like in 111 or do you see this as?
I think that would be an appropriate place because it needs to be amendable, can't, well, maybe not in an ordinance. In the past, those were temporary or guidelines, they were there, council adopted
Let's ask the
them.
law director, where did the ones in the past, the rules that were passed, were they resolutions? Did they?
So I typically think of council rules as being in chapter 111 and they're and being principally procedural in nature.
Okay.
There were supplemental council rules, I think they were called, adopted in maybe 2021 by resolution, which had a sunset date. And so you could theoretically take out the sunset date and adopt a piece of legislation that you may or may not want to codify, depending upon what you want these to be. I mean, if it's a code of conduct, it could even be authorized by motion, although a resolution would probably establish it more firmly. So I think either you would want to put them in chapter 111 or to do them as something that is distinct from those procedural rules. And you could do it, yes, by legislation, which would not need to be codified.
Okay.
when we did section 111, there is a piece of it that says we're allowed to create our own rules. And so I would go for the resolution route because I feel like that it's not something that's codified in our ordinances, but rather something that we resolve to follow. And then, but I don't know if that meets Councilman Pasha's concern about having this be more flexible and informal.
You know, I think we're all working as a team trying to figure this out, and I don't see these as competing priorities necessarily. I see them more as just, I think we all have different flavors of how maybe strict some of these should be or relaxed. My opinion is I'd rather this not be a rule, this would be a guideline. But if it shows up on my desk with the word rules on it, I'm gonna not argue with it. It's like, I'll go with it because I think we're as a team. This is just a suggestion.
Code of conduct makes more sense for you?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I mean, on the enforcement, if you look at Robert's rules, most of it, anything where something's enforced, somebody's censored or something like that, council votes on it. So that's what I meant by instead of because you don't want to have like a council president. I'm not saying me, but just somebody has a personality conflict with somebody. You don't want that person to be the only person that gets to like make decision on discipline. On actual sanctioning someone for some infraction.
I think, the word rules and code of conduct kind of points to a little bit of a dichotomy in this document. A lot of this is qualitative, it's the culture that we want to create, which is laudable. But there are a couple of standards in here, like the conflict of interest and attendance, that are different, that are more about performance of the job, and that have real, probably should have some real underlying procedures. If you have a council person who's simply not attending meetings, what's the standard for that? We haven't had that. Or if there is a conflict of interest that relates to the ethical, Ohio Ethics Commission standards, that's kind of different. So there are two different things in some ways.
And along those lines, you also have guidance or parameters in the charter.
Right.
And I think it's going to be important as you further develop these standards and as well as the potential changes to Chapter 111 to make sure that everything is consistent with those provisions.
You will help us do that, right?
Yes.
Councilor Pacha?
Yeah, I would love to be able to talk when we start talking about the number of meetings in a minute, but I also think just more for the optics for the community. Why are we spending our time on this? I think it needs to be said that I think we've lost council members because of bad behavior amongst members, resignations. I know some of my peers, including myself, felt really demoralized after some meetings, after we were accused falsely of things, and we felt like we had a target on our back from our own individual members. I heard of council retreats in the past that were not productive at all, just because you couldn't get any work done because there were temper tantrums and stuff. And I just think we need to make sure that we can certainly have our differences, but this body needs to be able to work through them constructively, even if those differences exist. And that's why I'm really happy. I know I'm just taking a little off track right now. I know we've got a time commitment, but if people are wondering, this is important. This is an important conversation.
And we are trying to set a tone for the future too,
It's
not
good to do it
just.
now,
Yeah.
in a crisis situation.
So we could leave that in there about the council president administering penalties, but it would be perhaps a consensus of council if there was a penalty to be assigned.
That's
The rest of that chapter reads, paragraph reads, members shall conduct themselves in a professional, respectful manner during council meetings and related activities, foregoing any personal attacks, offensive language, or disruptive behavior, such as, in parentheses, unnecessary whispering and cell phone usage. So is everybody okay with the rest of that? Does anyone have any questions on those last two few sentences? Okay, and then the following is in respect for public input. Members shall listen attentively to public comments and respect the rights of citizens to express their opinion. Council members shall refrain from interrupting or showing disrespect to members of the public and each other. President Cooley, you wanted to add that. This paragraph is titled Respect for Public Input. But you wanted to add the words and each other at the end.
Yes, what other people think.
I think it's a little redundant since in the sentence beforehand, members shall conduct themselves in a professional and respectful manner
Foregoing any personal attacks.
pertaining how we're conducting ourselves.
All right. Ethical standards. Again, this document was picked up from Vice President Davida Russell while she was on council. So I would give her credit for the majority of this work. Council members are expected to uphold high ethical standards and avoid behavior that brings disrepute to the council or the city. Council members shall avoid any appearance of conflict of interest by publicly disclosing on the official records any direct or financial interest or other personal or private right he or she may have in any legislation pending before council prior to passage of said legislation. We've already seen then since January, a couple of times when we've had recusals from council, so that particular ethical standard seems to be something we can all accept. Yeah.
And just confirming that a declaration of refusal is sufficient for publicly disclosing on the official record, right? Because then it gets in the minutes and things, okay.
Absolutely. Council communications and accessibility. Council members shall maintain open lines of communication with constituents and shall be accessible to the public when convenient for the council member. Communication updates on council activities and decisions shall be provided through official channels. The next sentence is highlighted by President Kuda. Council comments during regular council meetings should directly relate to the business of the city of Cleveland Heights rather than personal reflection or commentary. And then the last sentence of this paragraph is members are asked not to give any speeches that can be construed as campaigning during public meetings. And President Kuda added this in italics, giving some latitude. For instance, if you were honoring MLK or Jesse Jackson or some kind of particular celebration of history that needs to be enumerated or would like to be enumerated.
I mean, I know I occasionally reflect, and I'm not saying I'm the only one that does it, but I think I do it maybe a little more than others. If it's Martin Luther King Day, that's that could be, we as a city recognize that, so you could kind of say there's a city business there. When the death of a prominent official or somebody, prominent citizen of the United States, I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about that. Is that too much? I did it. I want to admit that I did it. I don't know how strict. I don't want to be doing something and then say, have a rule that says you're really not supposed to do this. So
I'll just remind us that when we went through chapter 111, we actually took this prohibition out of chapter 111. We agreed to take it out. And I would say that I'm in favor of that because we are elected. We do want to focus on city business, but at the end of the meeting, if we get 1 to 3 minutes, and I do agree on the limitation on campaigning, but I don't think there's anything wrong with us having an opportunity to say something that we may want to say, and we will deal with the consequences, whether that is, the public thinks that's good or bad. So I think there's no reason to have it there because we've taken it out of section 1, or we've proposed to take it out of chapter 111 already.
To take out that third sentence entirely.
Yeah, but I do like the last one, and I think that that's appropriate.
Yeah, we don't
So
want
separate public business from.
I would make that last sentence even stronger. Members are asked not to. Members should not give any speeches that can be construed as campaigning during public meetings. And that may be borderline illegal to do that anyway if you're using city resources for your own personal campaigning.
I didn't move my head at all during the prior sentence. I will provide comments on that when we get to 111 at some point, but.
Councilor Pasha.
Well, I mean, what happens if there's a school levy that's happening and you feel strongly about it, one way or another?
Personal campaigning? That's an issue versus.
I think you mean personal campaigning in this.
So,
I don't think.
We
On your
had,
behalf.
with Cedar Lee and Meadowbrook, you know, there was that council taking a position on
The initiative,
the initiative. With that,
that wasn't a tax levy. And so it's to some extent distinguishable. I'm not gonna try to answer that on the fly, except that I think that I would still favor and recommend refraining from campaigning speeches and I might even say particularly with regard to levy issues and things of that nature. But we can provide additional information for council when those issues arise.
Obviously, that doesn't mean that council people can't go out and campaign for those issues.
In their personal
In
capacity.
their personal capacity, yeah.
Then we need to make sure that that's stated here.
Yeah, we might have to tighten that up then, just because of
With
not
with
just,
Director Hannah's assistance.
yes,
Yeah, so we can come back and provide some more.
Thank you. And then is everybody okay with removing that third sentence completely, the yellow highlighted? Okay. And my time is up for this particular section, so we'll come back after the recess. Thank you, everybody.
all right, so we had a workshop, 7.5 hours of it, and some of it was devoted to legislative initiatives. Because, so we'll be coming back in August. I would assume August 17th, the agenda will be pretty full because we'll have been gone for a while. And so we're really looking at, you know, September, which is starting to get into budget season. I know the mayor's going to be soliciting our input. Can you, I don't know, can you talk about the timeline for that?
So the finance department drafted a schedule and they'd like to review it. They're welcome to.
So yes, we drafted a schedule. We're looking to kick off, we'll get a email kickoff on Thursday. We sent that out to the directors with the revenue projections due August 10th. Expense projections due a couple weeks later. And then we also have the budget hearings commencing around November 3rd or 4th through the 9th.
The election day for everyone who's maybe working.
I think it's November 4th through the 6th.
Yeah, 4th, 5th, and 6th.
Okay, so we just shortened, okay.
So everybody write that down, November 4, 5, and 6.
Send us calendar.
I will send you calendar invites and this will also be, you guys will be able to attend via, like virtually.
It's interfering with election day.
No,
No,
it's
we-
the avoid, it's the, yeah, so election day is the 3rd and then what's it be the 4th, 5th, and 6th.
So these would be nightly meetings,
During the day,
during
this
the
would
day.
be during the day.
I see, okay.
And Mr. President, just to reiterate, we're scheduling meetings with every council member so that we can understand the funding priorities for council so that we can build that into the budget.
That's very helpful and very much appreciated. But does anybody want to talk about any legislative initiatives that they think might be coming forward second half of the year? Yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, it's my hope that next week we have some time reserved to bring the short-term rental legislation to you. We've made good progress with Airbnb and their partnership with us in tax collecting. It's not finalized, but it's moving along. So my hope is that, especially as we're discussing the ADU legislation, that these two can sort of march forward. But I would hope that in August we would be getting into doing readings. The overall look of the legislation is that should council decide to enact it, that it might be enacted by the end of September, which gives then all of the property owners who have short-term rentals 90 days to the end of the year to register. And then our thought is that the taxation piece would begin in January with the collection of taxes. So that's the timeline of how the legislation might work. But we'll be, hopefully bring you forward, we've taken into account all the comments from our last session, so there's a clean copy that's been, that is in process to come to you.
Okay. Anybody else? Go ahead.
There's probably gonna be some deer management legislation that we're gonna need to get through in the August, September timeframe. It'll probably make sense for some portion of us to get with the law department in advance, just to give them a heads up of what's going on. I mean, this is assuming that there is gonna be some movement by us as a council.
Very good.
Just if I can, just to be clear on that, there's a public hearing scheduled for Tuesday, July 28th.
Thank you.
ODNR and Metro Parks will be the presenters.
This will be part of the Public Safety and Health Committee, which I was gonna mention in our large meeting, and I will still do so. I know it's a recess, but we're trying to get this done and trying to get the right people at the table and try to get some public input as opposed to like necessarily a true hearing. And I think it would be really great if members of this body can either attend or watch the meeting at some other point afterwards.
Did you still wanted that 15 minutes update during the committee of the whole on the 13th as well, correct, for the deer management?
Yes.
Complete and Green Streets, the revised legislation continues to be vetted by the administration. City Administrator Reese has received additional input from Directors Klingskow and Zandt. And when that input has been considered and the legislation amended, I believe the legislation will come back to the Transportation Mobility Committee and then back and on to council. I'm hoping that will happen by year end.
Councilman Cobb, I'm hoping that 111 will be one of the things that we do towards the end of the year.
Thanks to
yes,
Ms. Combs' work, it's been passed on to the law department, and I think we're looking to get it back in August. So.
I didn't see a head nod this time.
No, he said right, it's on the record.
Very subtle smile, but yeah.
We also have an email trail, yes. No, so on the planning, there is a lot happening on the planning and development side, but I think we've laid out more or less a schedule for ADUs, Landmark Commission, and the zoning code update. We will need some time for a special council workshop on the zoning code update after the recess, so that's something we'll have to schedule still. And then that will give us more of a sense of what's to come for actual legislation for the zoning update and how we wanna take that on, and we'll be talking about that next week for about 30 minutes.
This is to review the work of the consultant?
Yes, the zoning code update itself, which is separate from the building and housing code update, which we are doing separately.
Updates.
During that workshop, will we get an opportunity to suggest changes to the code?
That will be next week.
That will be next week.
We'll have a hot list. Hot list of topics but there is so much that staff has conveyed and been working on with the consultants. But I think that will be an opportunity next week to kind of just touch base on anything that is either not on the list or just to make sure that planning staff has it. And then we will get the recommendations and all of that and go through that when we have more time.
So when you refer to the list, you mean something we've already gotten an email and just?
No, not yet. The planning staff will present it to us next week at the committee of the whole meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? Any pre-recess outstanding items? We just threw that on there. Just like kind of a just in case thing.
The Hillside Dairy demolition is complete. Thank you, everybody that was involved in that. Looks different.
I think the fencing still needs to.
And the weeds whacked, but
Just a tiny amount of, just a small amount of landscape. But the fencing needs.
But they met their schedule, right? The contractor came in on schedule, I thought.
Yeah,
2 weeks.
no, they did a
Yeah.
great job.
I'll try to get out there on the break and
Drive by on your way home, you'll still see it.
anything else? Any other?
Yes, at our last committee of the whole meeting, we went into executive session to discuss the vacancy that we have on the Board of Zoning Appeals due to the resignation of a regular member. Based on the discussions during that executive session, I would like to make a motion that the alternate, Matt Alden, be moved over to fill the unexpired term from the member that resigned. And so if I could get a second for that motion.
Second.
Any discussion? We'll just get a sense of where everybody's at.
Is everyone good with doing that? Do we need to have a formal roll call on that, Law Director?
I mean, you will need a vote.
Yes.
I don't know if you're planning to do that in the meeting or.
No, I just like the okay to proceed with asking legislation be drafted
Sure.
and then in our August meeting.
So then you don't need anything.
So in our August meeting, then we'll have some legislation formally appointing him. We discussed that we are going to have the alternate position posted. I've asked for an email blast to go out for the next 2 Fridays with a deadline near the end of the month. There are, I think, 3 or 4 prior applicants. Addie, I'll reach out to them to find out whether they're interested, and there's no need for them to reapply, and I'll make that announcement in the meeting. And that was all I had.
Wait, before I forget, Councilman Cobb, we need to ask
It's gonna
the
be
planning
okay
director.
to move it. There's no urgency to it. So
Okay,
we spoke
okay.
during the meeting. So just in case anyone is, we were gonna schedule a hearing to have presentations on the 2 competing proposals for our arts assessment. And we were gonna try and do that before we broke for recess. We're gonna do it now.
Right when we come back?
Yes,
So do we
Send
need
out
to,
some
the
dates.
director is gonna, you already know
I
this.
already know, I'm gonna send out some dates to you guys.
so Rachel Bernstein has said that she and her people are available on the 17th. Do we need to do these at the same time?
I think it would be best to have them both present at the same time.
I think so, yeah. You don't wanna do it 2 separate nights, you'll forget what the first person said.
Okay, so
So
how long would this take? I mean, I just, like, you think we can get it done in a half hour
Well, we were thinking it was a half hour for each team.
for each team?
Well, you guys are meeting on 24th. Already, for the whole.
I'm okay with that.
we jammed up. When are we coming back in August?
The 17th
17th.
is like the first, which is our first meeting back, is our first day back, and then the 24th would be our first meeting of the whole.
And I think we have some planning things already slated,
Yes.
but that's part of
For
the,
the 24th.
Yeah, for the 24th.
Yeah, well, I mean, I expect that we'll have the usual stuff. I'm just saying, do we want to tack on an hour? I'm just,
Or we could try to do another day that, either the week of the 17th or the week of the 24th.
I know this is a way to look ahead, but what are we gonna have on the 24th? Planning and what else?
Potentially discussing the alternate position on the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Okay, so administrative services, but not necessarily a long meeting.
That's correct.
Wait, if Director Hannah has 111 ready, we might throw that on.
Our
there.
goal is to get that done by the end of the year.
Well, I'm saying, but okay.
Yeah, if he's got it done, we could have an
Are
overview
are
on
you
it.
planning anything for the 20? I know, I'm sorry. to
Yeah, I
hear
don't
that.
have anything top of mind, but
Okay,
potentially. I think, is that when we're gonna be discussing ADUs? Or
we are discussing EDUs on the
on the
17th
17th,
briefly.
are we gonna have enough time to get
No,
very
I
much,
think
so
we're
probably
gonna-
the 24th is gonna be a more wholesome conversation.
It's not scheduled for the 24th because we haven't like scheduled further out and how much if we needed a separate,
Yeah.
wanna do the
But
public
that's
hearings.
likely the time that we would have.
I already asked for 45 minutes for planning topics. That ADUs was not included because it was going to be something.
Do we have an idea of when the ADU public hearing by council would be? Maybe that's a question for you, cause they would be planning commission first and then council would have a public hearing for zoning change.
Yes, but in between, what I recommend from a process standpoint is that we have a policy discussion. So the public hearing is based
That
on
should be on the 24th.
on the actual updated redlined ordinance, so
So you guys would wanna meet after it goes back from the planning commission, you guys discuss, then you go to a public hearing.
correct. I mean, if on the 24th, we're supposed to have, potentially 3 hours of committee of the whole and planning stuff is the only thing on there, I mean, let's get it done, for.
Well, if you're the main thing and then maybe Craig has a little bit, but I think this hour would be, I mean, we're already together. I'd like to knock it out on the 24th. So Eddie, if you can get a hold of those two entities. And that would mean letting Rachel Bernstein know that we're not gonna do the 17th. First. Yes.
Point of clarification, I've been looking at all the listings for the members on our committees. And Addie's going to be working on making sure they're all up to date. When I came across the Commission on Aging, it's listed as 3 vacant members. Am I misreading that or are you down
I think it
through
might
them?
not have been updated. I'll double check on that.
Yeah, thank you, I appreciate it.
I know there's been turnover, but I don't.
I don't think there's vacancies currently.
Yes.
So I'll double check on that.
Alright, if it's okay with everybody, let's. Alright, so I'm gonna adjourn this meeting at 7:29. We're gonna go over to the regular meeting. And this meeting is adjourned.